Do you want to test it or?
I tested both of them before I started the recording.
Okay, cool.
I'm just going to position this a little over here.
Okay, like, is this good?
Yeah,
Okay.
like you definitely. It also helps that you project and you talk a little bit louder than
Yeah.
like Mark did, because when I had Mark over,
Yeah.
he talks so quiet
Yeah.
that I had to be like, hold it closer to you.
Yeah, part of the whole like talking loud thing is like part of like the self vocal training that I've tried to do. So like I try to talk like in the chest and
Oh yeah.
have the manly voice and um but yeah, one of the hardest things I think about what I was saying before was, one of the hardest things about being non-binary is like there's no set place for you, you know. It's just like you kind of have to make your own gender because like you're not in one box or the other. It's like I'm saying like a lot. I'm embarrassed now.
That's okay. That's what post is for. That's a lot of the times it's me cutting out my own ums and likes and
um
stuff like that.
like um
Like
I'm gonna start
the
going like Dane Cook in here. But yeah, no, you kind of have to make your own like gender. Really, like you have to decide everything because like for binary male and female trans people, there's like a set path. Now each transition is like always different. So I will say that like one binary female, binary, MTF is not going to be the same as another MTF because like your mileage may vary, but you know, um, every transition is different. I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I'm so embarrassed.
no, you're fine.
Um, Trying to think about the best way to put this. But yeah, you have to kind of make your own gender. Um, because you don't have a set path. Like the binary transgender people have like a set path. Like, you most of the time anyway. You go to therapy and then like you get on HRT and then like if that's something you want, you have bottom and top surgery and like then you live your life as like a transitioned trans person, whether you want to be out or stealth. Like that's something that's up to you, but for non-binary people, like you're non-binary all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, and like most people don't get it, which is discouraging. People will forget your pronouns if you use ones other than he or she. Um, I use personally they them, but there's like V and their, there's reclaimed its pronouns, there's all kinds of pronouns that are out there. So,
And
but
of course, you can't assume which ones any particular person's going to use because, for example, with the reclaimed its pronouns, I've known various non-binary people who, if you call them it, they are going to slaughter you.
yeah, yeah. So usually, like reclaimed is not something that you see commonly, but I have known a friend of a friend that has used its pronouns, and um, that was kind of odd to get used to, but that's what they wanted, and so that's what I was going to call them because that's what you do when people tell you your pronouns.
Yep.
um, but yeah, using they them pronouns, a lot of people try to do. Um, a lot of like mental acrobatics when they try to they're like I remember telling somebody and like they like started stumbling in the middle of their sentence trying to use my pronouns and I'm like, friend, it's okay. Like just think of it as like somebody you don't know the gender of, like, right, like when the pizza person is coming to the door, what do you say when they get there? Oh, they're here, like. And if it's really that hard, which I have mentioned this in like a panel I did before when somebody was saying that, oh, well, excuse us for being bad at they them pronouns because, we grew up with a certain type of English and like that was frowned upon. It's just like, well, if you have a problem with it, just, imagine there's a mouse in my pocket and then there's two of us. So, um, but yeah, they them just makes me feel the most comfortable, I think. Um, I attempted he pronouns like on my own not really with other people, and it just didn't feel right. And of course, she never felt right because I was the same female at birth. And I don't know, just started using they pronouns, and it felt the most comfortable for me. Yeah.
Which is good, and the best way to kind of go about it, because it's kind of like when, before I realized that I was trans, it was one of those things where, even being in like high school and college and stuff like that,
Yeah.
if I got quote mistaken for a guy
Mm-hmm.
and called he, I'd be like, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe a little less creepy.
So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. So before I realized I was non-binary, in high school, like I had some like kind of androgynous leanings. I always liked my hair short. I remember that, and I kept asking my mom to cut my hair shorter, but I was never like confident enough to be like, no, I want it cut like a boy's though. But it's funny that you say that because before transition, and I'll show you pictures, before transition, I leaned so hard into the traditional female role, like really hard. Just because I was just like, well, maybe I'm just not trying girl hard enough. Like, maybe that's why this doesn't feel right. And I had the nails and the curled hair, and I was like really into like retro 50s housewife stuff. Like, I tried so hard to be a girl. And then, like, a person really close to me transitioned, and I started doing some research because they're non-binary. And I saw a YouTuber, Ash Hardell, and I was like, oh, crap, it me. It me. Oh, no. What do I do? It me. So, yeah, that's how that happened.
Which, I mean, that's also kind of a common thing for trans people in general, is that, oh no, it me. Like,
oh no, oh shit, it me.
Because I did an interview a couple of months ago where the oh shit, it me was Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
And so, and this was a little bit older trans woman.
Mm.
So like, not very versed as much in like the YouTube people.
Yeah.
But like, you know, the whole Caitlyn Jenner thing blowing up all over the news and stuff.
Yeah.
She walked by the TV, like saw that and was like, huh. And
yeah.
then, like, the little light bulb turned on and was like,
ding ding ding.
Oh.
It was like, oh, and then it was like, oh no.
Oh no. And then of course every trans person's what do like
what do? Oh no. It me trans what do?
and then you do a bunch of research, and
yeah.
then you drown in all the research because you don't know what is anything.
Yeah, you don't know which way is up.
Yeah.
And that's scary. I started like kind of, because I had somebody ask me like, if you're non-binary, like if you started out as like assigned female at birth, right, and then you went to, what are you transitioning into? And the answer is to a non-binary person. Like there are a lot of like non-binary is really like an umbrella for like a lot of different identities. I have never really found a label that fit correctly, and I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants and seeing what feels right. But yeah, it's almost like, if, for me anyway, some people feel completely outside of the spectrum, but if like male was on one side, female was on the right side, and like if I would be just like center left, if I was to like put it somewhere. So I started with like experimenting with clothes. A big one for me was I had gotten married about was it about like a year, maybe 2 years previous. I'd gotten married, and um, I had grown my hair out for the wedding. I had short hair before that, really similar to the style I was wearing now, but just like more feminine. Um, and I had really long hair, and I kept putting it up in ponytails, braids. I kept trying to do things with it, and it just like no matter how much I did stuff with it, I didn't like it. And it wasn't like bad self-image didn't like it. It was like, this isn't mine, almost. Like, I don't know if everybody who's trans and experiences dysphoria experiences depersonalization when they have their dysphoria, which is like where you don't feel like you're operating your body almost. It almost feels like you're outside of your body and like looking, and sometimes like you don't recognize yourself in the mirror or in pictures, because like obviously your mental image of yourself and your gender is different than the mental image or the actual reality image that you see in the mirror. And so like for me, when I had long hair and I was just looking at it in the mirror, like I would like push it out of my face and try to do something with it, and it just, no matter how much I messed with it, it was just, yeah, it didn't work. And then I had a hairdresser, that I made an appointment. I had a hairdresser who cut all my hair off. And she told me a story about a gentleman that she cuts hair for, who was saying that every time he got his hair cut and looked in the mirror afterward, would say, "Oh, it's me. There I am." And like, I have that experience every time I go to the barber now. Is like, my hair is short, like it's the way it's supposed to be, and I look the way I'm supposed to. It's me. Yeah.
And I can definitely identify with the not recognizing the person in the mirror thing.
Yeah.
Because I had that a lot
Yeah.
before starting transition.
Mm-hmm.
Some days worse than others type of thing.
Yeah.
And it would just be kind of and I had kind of the similar thoughts of like, well, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with my gender. Maybe it has to do with all the shit that I've been through.
Yeah, like trauma.
Yeah. And so, like, especially if you either haven't realized that you're trans, whether it be binary or non-binary.
Yeah.
Or are refusing to believe that you are.
Yeah.
It's easy to not be able to know where those symptoms are coming from.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, like, because looking back in hindsight, you always, and I think that, like, there are some trans people that, like, they hear the stories of, like, 3-year-olds, like, "Oh, no, mommy, I'm a girl," and for me, I didn't really start understanding that there was something different about me until puberty, and I started developing things that I didn't want, and being expected of things that, like, didn't, like, appeal to me. But looking back, I can see, like, signs of, like, the way, because, like, the way I've like experienced gender, right, I feel like is like a mixture of nature, nurture, and culture, right? So I can see where, like, ways I was brought up, and then also I can see where, like, I just experience things different than other people, where this gender identity and presentation make the most sense for me.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not.
That's also, like, if we get too far off of topic, that's why
That's what post is for.
That's what post is for. And also why I'm going to be, whenever I get around to fucking editing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be starting a segment called Tangent Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Which is mostly going to be Finn.
It's just Finn, yeah.
It's just Finn being Finn. But it'll essentially be anything that is still good information but wasn't relevant to the topic at hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and also to let you know, when this thing hits 30 minutes,
Yeah.
it stops recording,
Oh, okay.
which is why I keep checking on it.
Oh, okay.
So whenever it gets close to 30 minutes, we're just going to pause it and I'll like, export the file and restart this program.
Okay, got it.
Because they're like, if you want to record more than 30 minutes, pay us $60. I'm like, haha.
No. No. Yeah.
So,
let me go back to the questions that.
oh, before you get to their questions.
Yeah.
I know that like you were saying that your kind of self-description of where you are on the gender spectrum is kind of like slightly left center.
Mm-hmm.
What are your opinions of the non-binary subcategories of like demi-boy, demi-girl, etc., etc., etc.? Because there's like 5 billion of them right now.
Yeah.
Like,
what my opinion of it?
Yeah, kind of like, I guess to be a little more succinct, like how do you feel about the perceived need to create a label for specifically a person's specific point on the spectrum?
I think it's extremely important. A lot of people will say, well, why do we all need all these new words? And, why don't we just call it one thing? And, or, even why even have non-binary in the first place? But having language to explain what you feel inside is extremely liberating. Like, I remember the first time I heard the word non-binary and had and understood it as myself, and having a word to explain the confusion and sometimes pain and sometimes good things that I experience being this gender has been extremely helpful for me. I think language is so important. And so if somebody needs a label outside of what, the big umbrella label is, I think go for it. If you don't expect everybody to just know it off the bat, because, most people don't even know what non-binary is, but, if you're willing to explain it, and if that's something that's important to you, then absolutely. No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that there's the quote Tumblr genders.
Yeah. I think that people make fun of and get irritated and scared of by things that they don't understand. And if you think about how enforced the gender binary is, especially in the US, you would understand where that fear and would come from, right? So when you go to buy a razor, do you buy the pink one or the blue one? When you go to a toy aisle, do you go to the Barbies aisle that's all pink and glittery, or do you go to the boy aisle with all the cars and the Legos? That's blue. It's our world is very binary, which can be isolating, I think, for a lot of non-binary people. But explains why people are sometimes afraid of us, and people show fear in different ways, and sometimes it's anger, and sometimes that's cynicism.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Alright, let's get to those questions.
Yeah, the Jake questions.
You want me to read them off so that you can just answer them?
Yeah, here.
Alright. So, some questions from audience members from the Q&A panel. Do you identify specifically as transgender and non-binary, or just non-binary?
Me personally, transgender and non-binary, just because the definition of transgender is that you don't identify with what you were assigned at birth. And my gender identity is very different from binary female, so yes.
Do you aim to present as non-binary in your dress, hairstyle, name, etc.? And if so, how is this done?
So again, our world is very binary. So things are associated with, male, female, and it's like a very hard line, right? So trying to find the right in-between space sometimes is difficult. Sometimes you run one way into another. But for me, I'm not pursuing HRT right now, so I have a very feminine outer appearance. So I try to make it more masculine as to become more like androgynous. Like passing, I guess, for me, looks like if I can confuse somebody, I guess, about like if they sir and man me in the same sentence, it's a good day. But yeah, for me, since I was things that are opposite of like more female stuff, right? So like cutting my hair short, wearing mostly men's clothes, although I do shop in both sections. I'm wearing more like male cut clothing and stuff like that, things to like kind of dress down how feminine my body is to become more androgynous. And then my name, I just kind of went through a list of gender neutral baby names and looked in a mirror and had somebody shout them at me until I found one that looked right.
I like that process.
Yeah, it was a good process.
I know we covered if you're transitioning from AFAB, what you're transitioning to.
Yeah.
Do you have a middle name, and is it non-binary as well?
Currently, no. I've struggled to find one that I've liked. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because my dead name, middle name, starts with an E, so my initials would spell H-E-R, which is kind of hellish. So no, I don't have a middle name as of right now, but I am attempting to choose one. Just haven't found one that feels right. I will be going through legal name change soon, and so need to pick one, but as of right now, no.
I mean, by all technicality, you do not legally need to have a middle name.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are people who, with their birth name, do not have a middle name. So, if you...
Well, if I didn't have a middle name, though, what is my partner going to call me when they're mad at me, though?
They just have to stick with the two names. Or they can make up a middle name.
Yeah.
And then they can cycle through them as they see fit.
Yes, yes.
Or they can just make your middle name be motherfucking.
Yeah. They can interject some expletives in there.
For people who are curious about non-binary questions, who should they reach out to?
So, this is something that if you have access to a non-binary person, obviously that's going to be your best person to reach out to. A lot of these questions did come from congregation members of the panel that we did. But when I was there, they didn't really ask them, and I think it's just because they're nervous. Because again, like, non-binary is like just being trans in general is kind of like, oh wow. So like encountering a non-binary person is new, and so I think a lot of them were nervous about like either offending me or like they were just nervous in general. But don't be. Like, I mean, obviously, don't go up to a non-binary person and it's like, what's it like being non-binary? Like, obviously like care about them as a person first and like try to get to know them. But like once you get to know a non-binary person, if you've got questions, be like, hey, I've got some questions about being non-binary just because I want to know what your experience is like. And if you don't feel comfortable answering them, of course. I mean, because this is how I really approach anything is like, hey, I got some questions, and if you don't feel comfortable answering them, then that's fine. But here are my questions, and, can you please help me understand? So I feel like the more we understand people, the less we have reactions out of, like, fear.
And of course, try to avoid any questions involving genitalia.
Yeah, genitalia, not so much.
Even if you're good friends with a non-binary person or trans person in general, you usually don't want to open with what's between your legs.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, you just, like, any question that you would ask either a binary trans person or just, like, a cis person, those are okay questions to ask. Like, if you wouldn't ask a person who isn't trans of the same, like, relationship to you, what their genitalia was like, then you probably wouldn't ask a trans person that. Not appropriate.
No. And pause this and export the thing because we're coming up on 30 minutes. You want to answer some questions?
Yeah, Nike wants to answer some questions. He's a good kitty. Mm-hmm.